We're really glad that you could all be here today. Thanks for joining us for another session of Empower Hour. Wanted to remind you this event is being brought to you by the Ohio University Alumni Association, where our goal really is to engage you, our supporters, and our alumni. We need you to stay involved with this university that you love because we just want to keep providing wonderful opportunities to current and future Bobcats, and that's how we're going to do that is by you staying involved and supporting us. And so thank you so much for being here today. My name is Caleb Biesecker. I'm the Associate Director of Alumni Experiences with the Alumni Association. I'm going to be the host for today. And to start, I want to point you back to the registration page, the page that you all used to sign up. And if you scroll to the bottom of that, you're going to see a link, and it's going to take you to some information on Alumni Scholarships. I wanted to point those out today and just talk about how wonderful of an opportunity they are. If you're looking to further your career, take the next step, or maybe you're considering being an entrepreneur yourself and want to learn more, that's a great way to get some resources to where you can come back and further your education even as an alumni. And so if you're pursuing a full degree and decide to do that, there's an opportunity for $5,000. If you're looking at a certificate, $1,500, but there's more information on that page. And I would definitely recommend going and looking at those different opportunities that are available to you. And if you're interested in supporting those scholarships and providing more opportunities for others, please feel free to reach out to me after the program. Just a few more pieces I wanted to mention before we get started. Your cameras and microphones are turned off, but please feel free to participate in the chat and give your thoughts and ideas there. Make sure you change the setting where it says to all panelists and attendees so other attendees can hear you as well. And also, if you have any tech questions, feel free to put those in there, and our event manager, Barb Fiocchi, will try and help you as best she can with those. This presentation is being recorded today, and so I just want to make you aware of that. It will be available on the Alumni Association webpage after the event is done. It usually takes us a couple weeks to get it uploaded, but you can go back and find it there. Also want to point out there's a code in the chat for the Bobcat store, 20% off. If you need your Bobcat swag, make sure you use that and go grab it there. Great way to start the new year. That expires February 3rd. And then be on the lookout for a follow-up email from us after this is done. We really appreciate your feedback and your support. So thanks again for being here. Appreciate you listening to all that. Now I'm going to turn things over to our presenters for the day and give it over to Dr. Luke Pittaway.
Thank you very much. The Bobcat swag sounds good. I might have to go and get hold of that code when I get a chance. So my name is Dr. Luke Pittaway. I'm the O'Blennis Professor of Entrepreneurship here on the Ohio University campus, and actually also the Associate Dean for Graduate Programs in the College of Business. I've been at Ohio for 7.5 years now, and previously was the Center Director of the Entrepreneurship Center, and had the wonderful opportunity to work with John Zeno and Aaron Hoffman very early, quite a few years ago now, I guess, as they were talking about their business in Athens and on the OU campus. So real pleasure to welcome them back today and to have a panel conversation about entrepreneurship, graduate entrepreneurship, the challenges, the enjoyable aspects, and also what you can learn and the experiences you can get from it that can be applied elsewhere. So I'm going to kick things off by asking John and Aaron just to introduce themselves and just talk briefly about their company in terms of what the company does. So maybe Aaron, start with you.
Sure. Name's Aaron Hoffman. I was a student at OU, graduated in 2016. I'm one of the founders of Deliver That. We are a national leader in pre-scheduled catering deliveries. We also do other type of deliveries like meal prep, grocery delivery, route-based delivery, you name it. We have a fleet stretching coast to coast, servicing 85, 90 major metropolitan areas, thousands of drivers. They're moving millions of dollars of food a month. And so John.
Great. And Aaron, what's your role in the venture?
I'm the CEO.
Great. And then John?
You summed it up pretty well, Aaron. My name is John Zeno. I graduated in 2016 as well. I'm the Chief People Officer and co-founder of Deliver That.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, guys. So my first question is just, it'd be wonderful if you just talk about the very start of the venture. I mean, it started on the campus here. It started in Athens. I'm interested to just hear that early stories. Like, why did you start it? What was the motivation? How did it get started? What were you engaged with to start with?
Yeah, I'll take this one, John. I love telling this story. So it was probably the first cold day in Athens. We were both sophomores. I lived in Adams Hall. John was in, I believe, Pickering. And yeah, we were walking to Shively Dining Hall, and it was the first cold day. And we were like, man, students would have this food delivered to them. And it sort of just clicked for me. And at the time, John will tell you, he didn't want anything to do with it. Didn't want any part of it. Didn't want to deliver kids anything. So we went ahead and made a Twitter account. And I mean, in 48 hours, we had 4,000 plus followers. I forget the vice president of the school at the time. John, do you remember his name? But
Lombardi?
Yeah, Vice President Lombardi. He retweeted us or something like that. And we got a ton of traction overnight. And boom, we looked at each other. Hey, we have a business. So we were like, okay, let's start, delivering kids food. And that turned into delivering kids pretty much anything that they wanted besides alcohol or tobacco. Kids would order, Chipotle, textbooks, homework to their classroom, you name it. And we just found a real opportunity there and filled the void. I was a pre-med student at the time. John was an engineering student. So that was the birth of Deliver That. And it was previously called OU Delivery, and then Campus Delivery. And then in 16, when we graduated and we came back to Canton, Ohio, that's when Deliver That essentially was born.
Mm-hmm. So, John, do you want to add anything to that?
I mean, there's so many different things we had to do back then, but yeah, that really sums it up. We started with just cash and started with $60. And I would just give drivers money out of my bank account because we had no way. We didn't accept credit cards. Him and I didn't have a car on campus. So that was one of my main reasons initially. That's why I said no to doing the idea, because I just thought for a second, okay, I think I'm gonna have to run around campus and deliver people Chipotle. Then people started applying on our website, or people just started applying somehow. And we had half the basketball team driving for us. We had these, 6'7" guys walking in with cash into our dorm. And it was very interesting. That's for sure.
Yeah. So this was like, business model before kind of Ubereats and some of these other delivery companies that have really taken off in the last few years. And so what were you thinking when you first did this? I mean, were you like, oh, this is just a little bit of extra money for us, or this is really going to go somewhere? Or did you have any sense that this type of approach would be quite what it is today?
There was one specific point I remember being at Ping, and I remember I played basketball. Then afterwards, I looked at my phone and saw all the orders that our drivers completed while we were working out. And I figured, wow, we're making money while we're not working. That's when it really clicked that, okay, I think we might have something here. And we just continued to, provide good customer service and keep our heads down and working. We didn't really have too much time to think as we juggled everything and somehow still had social lives and, some way we finished school. No idea how we were able to finish. So, juggling all those types of things, it was tough to really kind of digest what was going on at the time.
Yeah. And so, I think you had lots of drivers a lot quicker than I actually realized, because I seem to remember you initially doing some of the driving yourself. And was it kind of hard to, how did you manage that model? I mean, the drivers obviously are self-employed. It's that kind of model, making sure that they're fulfilling what they need to do properly and managing the quality. That must have been quite challenging.
Yeah. You could think when we first started, it was about as barbaric as you can imagine. A couple college kids with just a group of people that would deliver food. So we didn't even use hot bags at the time. We didn't do any sort of MVRs or, quite frankly, we didn't even contract drivers. We just sort of said, hey, come talk to John and myself. If we think you're good enough, we'll get you on the road and we'll start delivering. So, as we, progressed through our years, we started to, fill in the gaps. So, okay, you got to make sure that the food's quality is always sound. You got to make sure that, you're not, how do you word this? You don't have too much liability, on your head. So we, as time went on, we sort of checked the boxes that was necessary to, I guess, scale the business to other college campuses. keep the quality, right, and also handle that customer service aspect.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, this was a business to business model, and you were having not business to business, business to consumer model, and you were having pretty much delivering anything. I mean, was it predominantly food, as many of these apps and systems are now, or did you find that you were? I mean, what was the funniest thing you had to deliver?
Oh yeah, well, man, I'll never forget. Well, to answer your first question, yes, it was predominantly food. Definitely food. We would always go to Walmart, Kroger, grocery stores as well. But I will never forget delivering homework to a classroom. Me personally doing that for somebody. So, and John and I will tell you that we've, still to this day, we'll still get back out in the field and deliver. But when we first started, we were delivering almost 7 days a week.
Yeah.
All the orders got run through my phone. So just imagine your phone constantly be pinging nonstop. People just, ordering, this or that. One of us would have to call the order into the restaurant. It was just a mess. It was not streamlined when we first started. And really, it was kind of honestly funny how things turned out. And thankfully, when we graduated, we came back to Canton and found the real niche opportunity with catering delivery.
Great. Yeah, and we'll come back to that in a bit, because that's quite a big pivot for you. You mentioned before John wasn't really that keen initially, and you're studying engineering and pre-med. I mean, those are kind of big subjects with great careers potentially ahead of you. And so, just I wondered about your the motivation initially. I mean, how did you? What motivated you? Had you done entrepreneurial things before, or is it just I'll generate a bit of cash? I mean, what was the kind of underlying sort of motivation for you?
I would say for me, it was back to that moment when we realized we were making money when we weren't clocked in. Because before college and during college, I was always working normal jobs, clocking in, clocking out. And for me, that when I found out that you could make money in another way, and I never really thought about it in the past. I always just thought about what I wanted to do, not necessarily how I was going to make money. It was kind of just, what do you want to do when you get to college? And that mindset kind of changed everything. And I didn't really want to have a boss after that. When I realized that when we were able to be our own boss and make some money without any backing or anything along those lines, it kind of just made sense for us to continue.
Mm-hmm. Aaron, what about you?
This is going to sound extremely selfish, but the reason why I decided to go to college was to ultimately make money. And, I was never passionate about becoming a doctor. I just knew that they paid quite a bit. You could be a surgeon and make, quite a bit of money. So when I come from a family of entrepreneurs, and when, it all clicked for us and I saw this was working, we were making money and we're profitable, it was a no-brainer. I said, pre-med to the side, we're going into business school and focusing on business.
Yeah. So pretty. So you mentioned a few of the challenges that you experienced in that early stage. Just getting the systems in place, getting the business model in place, trying to figure out where some of the risks were and trying to remove those risks. Some of those things you mentioned. But I wondered any particular challenges that that first period while you were running the business on campus, and in the initial period before you did the pivot to the new business model.
Well, John, sorry. One thing that I would say that to start was just understanding, I guess, how to correctly hire or staff. That was a big problem for both John and myself. Because obviously, him and I had to fill in a lot of the voids. We had to work a lot, do a lot of the deliveries. And I would say that, as well as technology. Him and I both aren't tech people. We definitely weren't tech people in college. Didn't know how to build a website, didn't know how to build an app, none of that stuff. It would have made things 10 times easier. Yeah,
that was going to be one of my main things, was trying to balance, because we weren't able to staff correctly. Or you would just have people just wouldn't drive that night. They said they would, the week prior. So always being willing to work at any given second, really. That was something that I think was very challenging, but it definitely got us used to it and kind of immune to it, and it helped us a lot.
I guess that cut back your ability to go on Court Street then somewhat. It's like a bit like the doctors on call. I'm best friends of a plastic surgeon, and he could never drink anything because he never knew when he was going to get called to do something. So yeah,
we still found a way to go to Court Street.
Yeah, good. I'm glad to hear it. You take turns. Yeah, I mean, obviously this is quite a cash-rich business in many ways, and so I'm assuming that you've managed to grow pretty much by generating revenue and reinvest in it. But I'm just interested, how you financed it? Did you have to, use credit cards? What sort of methods did you do to kind of, because you've grown quite substantially over the years, and if you had to kind of engage in various different financing methods?
Yeah, we pretty much self-funded for the most part. My father gave us $15,000 to have an app built back in 16. This would have been the spring or summer of 16. That app never even panned out. We don't even use that. So we took that investment in. In 18, we got aligned with a strategic partner who put some cash into the business, but really we used that to grow quite a bit. But yeah, other than that, we have not, taken in any other sort of funding, haven't needed to. There hasn't really been a need. So we've been pretty much self-funded. Yeah,
that's when I talk to my entrepreneurship students, that's one of the big tips is like, come up with a cash generating business, and then you don't have to get investment. You don't need the finance.
Yeah. That's one. Yeah, definitely something I would tell any entrepreneur that, raising money, it's awesome. Don't get me wrong. There's definitely times when you need to do that. But if you can find a business where you don't have to raise money, do that.
Yeah. And I can tell you now, I see people, obviously I'm working with people all the time where they have to raise money, or they don't necessarily have to raise money, but they get focused on it, and it becomes the entire business. It's like going around trying to raise money as opposed to actually getting the business going and generating revenue and the cash. And for some businesses it's necessary, if you've got a technology startup, and then obviously it takes quite a bit of money, but in best to come up with a business model that doesn't need it. So I just you've engaged a bit with the ecosystem here when you were here, and I know I met you very close to the end of your tenure here on campus, and we obviously have been trying to work hard to create a space for students who want to start businesses to actually be able to do that on campus. And I just wondered, you had a few interactions. What interactions were helpful? Was anything that was useful? And what's your view on the role of a university in helping students start businesses?
I would say for us, I had a few interactions with the different professors over at the entrepreneurship school. Dr. Luke, Dr. Pidway, you definitely helped me tremendously when we worked together. I think I had not an internship,
independent study.
Yeah, an independent study that I did on my company that I did with you, and that helped quite a bit. But I think learning how to structure kind of yourself, that was one of the main things in college that I learned is, managing time, kind of structuring yourself around your priorities, what you should be doing at this moment, what you shouldn't be doing. I think with us, it was a little unique where the principles that we learned by starting the business are things that we still carry on today, like customer service and, different principles like that, to me, are really what continue to fuel us forward and continuing to educate, because that's all we were doing the whole time we were in Athens. We were just educating our team, educating our drivers, relying on ourselves to get the job done. So I think, those types of principles we keep pushing forward and ensuring that our team, continues to use every day. That's the only reason really we're successful.
Yeah, I seem to remember some interaction with Tech Growth Ohio, which is the venture capital company on campus. And I know they didn't invest, but I think there was some influence to the change of name and things that had occurred there, if I remember rightly. Is that right, Aaron?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing that I've learned, from the entrepreneurship school, center was there was a gentleman, Michele Migliolo, who was really put it into perspective to me on how to pitch and put together a pitch deck I've been in some of the, boardrooms of some of the largest restaurant groups you can imagine, some of the biggest ones you guys probably have dined at before. And that was the foundation that helped me sort of, become knowledgeable on how to pitch and articulate a message to a C-suite or an investor. There's a certain way that you need to do it. And that was the start that I would say that I would not be the CEO today without his guidance, and definitely the Entrepreneurship School's guidance. Or center, I should say.
And clearly, obviously you probably know that I do research in entrepreneurial learning, and the one thing that we do know is that learning by doing is like the critical thing. You have to start the business, you have to find out where all the kinks are, you have to solve the problems, and as you learn through those processes, you learn the things that are required for your next stage of the venture itself. So what John was saying before kind of aligns very, very well with what we know about the kind of skill sets that you need to pick up as you go along. So let me just move to the kind of post Athens, the post on the university campus kind of approach. And you made a pretty big pivot in your business model, which I think is really underlying much of your growth now, given the increasing competition with companies like Ubereats and some of those other DoorDash and so forth. So I'm really interested to learn a little bit more about, how that pivot occurred, and, maybe explain exactly what happened business model wise, and why that happened to the audience.
Yeah, I can kind of tell that story. Right after we graduated, we got an app built. The app was not good, but it worked. It did its job for a little bit. Our idea was simply, we can compete with DoorDash and Ubereats and these guys because they weren't on campuses. They weren't in small towns like Canton, Ohio, those types of towns around the country. They just weren't there yet. They were only in big cities. So we figured, okay, we have plenty of time. If we work hard, we do a national expansion, national tour, go to each area, we can make this thing happen. So we started off going to Miami University, went to Kent State, Akron. So we launched in some of these areas, had a lot of trouble with our tech, found out that was a big issue. We really weren't interested in raising money because at the time, and still are, we were actually profitable. So we were actually making money, and we didn't want to give away a big piece of our company, basically bring in a boss, which would be by raising money. We weren't really interested in that. We really struck out in Miami and at Kent State, not much traction. We were competing with another company at the time. And we went back home to Canton, Ohio, started to launch it here, went into a Ruby Tuesday. And they said, well, we'll do this with you, this on-demand delivery, but we really need your help with catering. And again, I looked at Aaron and said, wow, I don't want to do that because I can't imagine having to train or educate drivers on how to take out $200, $1,000 of food and set it up in a boardroom. I was just imagining the drivers that we had in college and the kids that were, doing the deliveries. I would never want them to take something like $1,000 worth of food into a boardroom. So, but we said, okay, let's try it because we were making no money whatsoever. And Aaron and I drove for Ruby Tuesday here in Canton, Ohio for a while, a little too long. And we found out that people order catering every single day and it's a big money maker. And we ended up pivoting to really a business to business company. And instead of our consumers being the end consumer, our consumers now are the restaurants. So the restaurants, it's almost like if the restaurant's calling an Uber for their food. That'd be the idea, right? So they call us up and say, hey, we need your help, right? Obviously virtually. And we supply them with a educated driver, someone who is able to actually execute their delivery as they would expect. And right now, there aren't really any national players doing this. There are a couple other companies that do attempt this, but not at the scale or at the quality that we provide. So we're able to continue to grow and continue to win.
Yeah, and it's a pretty major pivot, and more importantly, allows you to be in a position to compete with all those big established companies with all the investment they've got behind them. and still, obviously perform very well. So I mean, maybe you could expand on how do you've had to go out there and get lots of corporate contracts, and you've grown really rapidly, as far as I could tell from LinkedIn, to multiple cities, and you must have to roll out new drivers and new management teams in each city. It must be a real complex process. So it'd be nice to hear a little bit more about how you've sort of developed that growth phase, if you like, and how you managed to get the big contracts, how you manage the kind of rollout of new sites and so forth.
Yeah, so you could think of our business as pivoting twice. And I know we're going to get this later on, but when COVID happened, we pivoted again, and I'll explain that in a second. So prior to COVID, when we were onboarding drivers, the only real way to control quality was to meet them face to face, either have one of our launchers who we would send to a market to launch, a market for 2 to 3 weeks. Sometimes larger markets like in Atlanta took 4 weeks. And they would literally set up shop, meet drivers, hand out bags, go on ride-alongs or shadowings on an existing delivery, and boom, you have a driver that's ready to go. The way we would get contracts was, just you could imagine any sort of cold calling sales, team does it. I'm talking a lot of LinkedIn, a lot of emails sent. We went to a lot of trade shows, shook a lot of hands, talked to a lot of people, passed out a lot of business cards, and the ones that gave us a shot, we proved that we were the real deal, and boom, we would get another 5 or 6 of their locations or 10 locations to actually start servicing. So that's how we would get contracts. So once you had a contract, say, I'm going to use one by example here, Zoe's Kitchen, okay? They're a national restaurant brand. And say, for example, you have 10 Zoe's locations in Dallas, Texas. Well, we would go expand down there, already having that contract. So essentially, we already have the deliveries. Now you need the drivers and match them up. So that was the process before. When COVID hit, it really left us scratching our head because you couldn't onboard drivers the way we used to. You can't have ride-alongs or shadowings anymore. You can't have another driver interacting with a new driver, getting in the same car. You don't know where that person's been. So we had to think outside the box again, and which ultimately led to us doubling the size of our serviceable areas. We were able to come up with a proprietary way to virtually onboard, educate, qualify, and essentially get on the road drivers that no other company has been able to figure out. So that has been a blessing in disguise during this whole pandemic, that we've been able to essentially cut costs significantly when it comes to acquiring drivers, which has ultimately led to our expansion, being as turnkey as you turn a couple zips on with your existing contracts, you post some job ads, you get some drivers, start taking deliveries. They get trained, or I shouldn't say trained, they get educated all online. They have their own account rep. Every single driver in our company has an account rep that they can talk to in our office here. So they have their own person they can talk to. It's quite fascinating, actually.
It is interesting you say that, because a lot of innovations come out, and high growth companies actually emerge often from periods of crisis like this. It's like you have to innovate because you're forced to, and then all of a sudden, when you come out of the crisis, the innovation that you've had to create has ended up being the thing that's helped you grow afterwards. So fingers crossed for you guys that's the case too.
Yeah, because contrary to like the on-demand delivery companies like Grubhub, DoorDash, those guys who are delivering single, orders, we were delivering office catering. Our revenues dropped 80%, 80 to 85% the first week of COVID. It off a cliff. So we were able to get revenues back to where they were pre-COVID by 19.
And of course, the office catering will come back at some point. It's just not going to come back immediately. And I imagine that one of the benefits of that business model, though, is clearly that for each delivery, it's a much better, revenue generator. The margin's probably higher. Some pretty good benefits for that business model when you were, applying that particular model. Any particular, challenges that you experienced as a consequence of growing so quickly? Because that was one thing that impressed me, looking at you from the outside. It's like, man, these guys are really growing quickly. This must be pretty, whenever you have high growth, it's a blessing and a challenge.
Yeah, John, I'll take this one first. I know you have some after this.
Mhm.
People was the number one thing that were, especially learning how to lead people. That was what I struggled with the most. I would say for the first, I still am learning, how to lead a team of people. So that was definitely the most difficult part of scaling so quickly.
Yeah, and of course that was going to be my answer as well, because as I always fall back to it, I think about all the different challenges and a lot of the things we're able just to overcome. Maybe not easily, but we were able to overcome them. But with leading people, getting your people to buy in, finding the right people, vetting the right people, we were able to do that with drivers, but it was tough to do that with our internal team, because Aaron and I, we never really had to hold each other accountable. It would just be, hey, you take the phone tonight, or you work, you do this. And it just, you wouldn't really have to worry too much. And then when you started to bring other people in, you found out that you did actually have to hold people accountable, and they wouldn't work as hard as you would. So that was a pretty tough reality check, realizing that people weren't going to work on our business as hard as we would work on it.
Yeah, when we think about the growth phase again, have you has that all been financed through the cash generated from the business, or have you had to do various other things? I mean, I'm thinking about specific contracts with companies where they might pay you in advance or things like that. Some of those kind of contracts sometimes help businesses get going.
Yeah, we've had one.
Yeah, we've entertained that. We've done that, one time. We had in a kind of like an advance, and then we just ended up taking those deliveries. So that was nice. But other than that, really, we're profitable. And now you imagine how much it would cost to send one or two team members. I went out to Seattle for 3 weeks, and then I would go up to Vancouver for 3 more weeks, and that costs $15,000-$20,000 to launch those cities. Now all I literally do is add a zip code in a spreadsheet, and we start looking for drivers. So you can imagine that it's a lot cheaper. I wouldn't say it's really easier, but it's just the challenges are different, but the costs are much, much lower.
John, in addition to that, I would also say that we're able to control virtually basically all of those steps throughout the launch, whether you're onboarding a driver, onboarding a new restaurant, they're getting the same exact experience every single time, which is one thing that we definitely struggle with, having so many hands in the pot with lead drivers or, new team members, or, they weren't doing it the exact same way every single time. Technology and doing this virtually really has filled in that gap.
So I'm going to bring forward one of my questions, because this kind of segues into what you were talking about, is like, so how do you sort of envisage the business going forward post-COVID, since you've had these 2 pivots that you've had to go through?
I mean, the sky's the limit for us. We have a business right now that's generating, a significant amount of cash. We're reinvesting that money into other opportunities, other ways to grow the business. I could foresee us, for example, white labeling drivers to specific restaurants. Say, for example, a restaurant wants to, lease one of our drivers for a day. That's definitely possible. We want to get into more of the full service catering opportunity. There's a lot more there's a lot different types of deliveries that we're not getting into yet that we could qualify for, like medical delivery, pharmaceutical delivery, anything that needs a higher quality or higher tier of driver. We could potentially get into that.
Yeah, because our expertise is really sourcing and educating drivers. And we just happen to be in catering.
So the thing that intrigues me as well is that your positioning in the marketplace, given how competitive this space is with the Ubereats and the DoorDashes and some of those high growth companies that have taken on significant levels of investment, you're potentially an acquisition target at some point, given that your positioning in the marketplace is very unique, and you're probably, I think, the only one that's in that position, that particular niche in the market. So where do you feel about that? I mean, what's your kind of attitude to Ubereats coming and knocking on your door and trying to acquire you?
I think it's always exciting, right? I think having the potential to have a lot of cash is very exciting, but for us, we realized we've really only got here by just continuing to work and looking ahead at what we're doing instead of going out and searching for money. So for us, obviously we think about it, we understand the position that we're in, but to ever get a figure that would even be interesting, I think we need to continue to grow and work with more restaurants and truly help the restaurant industry, because the restaurant industry is almost in shambles at the moment, right? Restaurants are closing left and right. So we're able to help them at the moment with the most profitable piece of their business, which is catering. And if we can help them with that, I think we can do a lot of good within the restaurant industry. So for us, we don't think too much about it, but we know it exists, and we're always interested. But we do like what we do. So.
And I guess you never say never, do you, with these things? So Aaron, did you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I would just a couple of things. We definitely have been approached numerous times before, but to any potential entrepreneur out there that's listening to this, one thing that John and I had to go through a couple times was you have to ultimately know your number. That when you have to take all the emotions out of it. It's way different when you see an offer or an LOI in front of your face, for millions of dollars. You look and say, wow, that's a lot of money. But is it your number? Are you willing to part ways with it at that point? That's what I would suggest to anyone that potentially is building a business and growing it. Take the emotions out of it, have your number. And if it makes sense, do it, but if it doesn't, focus on your business, keep growing it, keep solving problems.
Great, thank you. Good point. So I just want to, this is Empower Hour, and this is very much about alumni developing their own skills and competencies. So I just want to switch a little bit to, the things that you've learned along the way, and any tips that you can give to other alumni, whether they want to be entrepreneurs or whether this is just working in a corporate environment. What do you think you've learned? What key competencies do you think you've learned that you would say would be transferable or valuable in say another context?
I would say bringing value to the marketplace in general. To me, that was always the most important thing. For us at OU, when we first started, we obviously knew that there was no one else doing deliveries, so it was just obvious value there. People went crazy whenever we said we would deliver them Chipotle, right? But when we ran into challenges, we just continued to think, where can we bring value to these restaurants, these customers, these whoever? And that ultimately got us to where we're at. We continued to find just different avenues, different spots that we could bring value in. And that doesn't mean that you charge for that value. It could just mean that it just makes them say yes. It could just mean that it's an easier sell because you do X, Y, and Z instead of just doing X like your competition. And then if you would take that into, the corporate setting, bringing value to your employer, to me is, would obviously be the biggest money maker for yourself, right? If you're able to bring more value in different types of ways, you're able to teach and educate and lead. That's really where you're going to make the money in the marketplace, because those are the intangibles. So for me, it'd be bringing value as the absolute number one, and just understanding what value really means. It doesn't always mean just you're charging this for this. It could mean you're just giving these services for free in exchange for a yes. It could be something like that.
Okay. Aaron, what do you want to add?
Yeah, something that I struggled with for the longest time was, getting the wrong people in our company off the bus. You might have people in the wrong seat on the bus, but if you're running an organization or you're in charge of a team of people and they can't buy into what your vision is or what you're trying to do, you need to get that's cancerous. And something that I've been struck with numerous times is that it is better. It's extremely painful, in the moment, but in the long term, getting the wrong people out of your company or out of your team sooner rather than later will be the biggest, pro that you can probably do as a leader. You need to make sure that if you're running, an organization or a team, that everyone, in that organization or team, sees your vision essentially and marches to the beat of your tune.
Yeah, because to piggyback off of that, we just viewed our company as a bus, and either you either should be on the bus or you shouldn't, and if you should be, are you in the right seat? And if you should be on the bus, but you're not in the right seat, then let's find the right seat for the person. And that's been absolutely massive for us.
There's been too many times where, a bad apple has just stayed in the bunch and it's poisoned others. Too many times in this, and we don't allow it to happen anymore. We just, we preach it in our own leadership meetings. Cut the cancer out, get it out. It'll hurt in the moment, but long term, you'll be in the best position possible.
And in a way, you probably answered this a little bit, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. In terms of learning experiences, in entrepreneurship, we often talk about failure. Falling over, failing fast, failing quickly, learning from those experiences, and actually sometimes that can be the most important way in which you can learn as you're trying to start a business, because you're always doing stuff, and you're going to have small mistakes and errors along the way. So when you think about a failure experience, something you personally probably have, this has been your failure rather than somebody else's, and you've learned from it, what would you and it's been important, the learning experience, what are there anything you would say?
Yeah, I've failed numerous times correctly articulating the vision and where this company's going. Something that I make sure that I always address that. And in fact, we have this today, our monthly company meeting, to make sure everyone is aligned at all levels. So that's one thing that I've learned throughout the years. Having alignment from the top down, bottom up. You have to be aligned. You can't have one area of your company not in tune with all the other areas, especially as a small business. We're not Apple or Microsoft, where you have numerous divisions and you have basically numerous companies within a company. A small business, under 40 employees, everyone's got to be aligned. So I would say that's an area that I've definitely struggled with in the past that that I've learned from.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. I think even to go a little more granular, just thinking about all of the times, we used to just go into restaurants, asking for the manager to just hopefully talk to them, right? So thinking about all of those failures over and over and over again, those just gave us, the resilience to do it. And for us, we just said, why not? Let's just go in there. Let's just go talk to them. What's the worst that could happen? And that was really our mindset most of the way, until you have something a little more valuable that you could lose. What's the risk? Just try it.
And I'm guessing, from your story earlier, that you probably wouldn't have done the business to business pivot if you hadn't been doing that. It sounded like you went into the Ruby Tuesdays, and that led to, in some ways, to your change of business model. Was that a fair reflection?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to, at this point, I may carry on with the conversation. We have like 15 minutes left. I don't want to consume all the time, but we can open up for some questions in the chat. So I don't know if we have any questions that anybody's wanted to ask. Does anybody, Caleb, you're going to manage this. If there are any, please type them into the chat. If there aren't any, I'll carry on.
Yeah. We'll give them a minute to type some things into the chat there. And if I see any pop up, I'll be sure to mention them. But I'll just pose a question myself. There was a lot of talk about people being in the right seat. Just those different conversations, so much centered around people. What are you guys looking for in new people to join your team, or when you were expanding your team? What traits, qualities were you looking for in people that set them apart of like, we want them on the bus. We are stopping the bus to get this person on here with us.
I would say simply looking for people who are hungry, ready to work. They didn't have to work like us. They didn't have to have the mindset that we did, and they still don't. But it's having the drive, seeing that in their eyes. To me, it was pretty obvious. Yes, some people could lie around it. They could fake it, but it was kind of that inherent piece where, okay, this person's willing to do not anything, but generally whatever it takes to get the job done. That to me was always extremely valuable, because yes, I knew their strengths on their resume. You would try to find out their weaknesses, but you could only find out so much. It was really just what their interaction was like. And we learned that from, interviewing and meeting hundreds, if not thousands of drivers, over the last, however many years, 7 years. So that's kind of given us a lot of help in that realm, I would say.
Yeah, I would say, in addition to what John had mentioned, someone that is going to go above and beyond what the job description, entails. I would say that's one of the biggest pet peeves of mine is when someone tells me that's not my job description. When you're in a small business, especially a company that's, I would say under 200 employees, you have to be able to wear multiple hats. So you have to be able to, navigate numerous roles. There might be a time where, you don't want to do something that's on your job description, but just, step up and be a team player. So that's what I look for is team players, people that are hardworking, and really ultimately will challenge, and ask questions. They don't just say yes and nod their head and just, hold something back. They'll speak up.
Yes. One of my previous entrepreneurs that used to work with used to joke that I am the CEO and the bathroom cleaner.
Exactly.
Every piece.
I think there was a couple of chat questions now.
Yeah, there are. Do you want to read those, Dr. Pitaway?
Let's see if I can find them. Hang on a second. I didn't have them. Let's see. Ooh, there are quite a few here. Let me just. Did you work with the Ohio Small Business Development Center?
Yes.
And was it what sort of support?
Plenty of support, but it was mainly around getting pitching for a grant from the state of Ohio through that center. That was really a lot of the work that we put in or used them for. Tons of guidance. It was fantastic. Just didn't end up panning out. It worked out in other ways and helped us with our pitch to end up receiving some money elsewhere. But, other than that, we just kind of kept our heads down and asked for some guidance when we could, but not too much.
And then next question is, where do you see your company growth-wise in the next 5 to 10 years? What are your own measures of scaling the business?
5 to 10 years, haven't looked that far ahead. I would say within the next 1 to 3, especially as a small business, our size, I don't look that far out. There's just too many factors that come into play. I would say in the next 1 to 3 years, getting to about 20 million in revenue would be a big goal of ours. Scaling is the way I look at scaling is expanding into more markets at essentially, a more cost-effective manner. So during COVID, for example, we were able to better scale because we actually, increased our gross profit margins by about 13% by implementing this digital onboarding. So that's, I would say, one way I look at scaling is decreasing expenses and growing revenues, particularly growing revenues. But that's where I see the company in the next 1 to 3 years.
Great. So next question is, what's your idea of using a startup accelerator to bring an idea to life? I mean, I don't know how much experience you've had of accelerator programs, but do you have any views on that?
I would just say I would assume it would depend on the idea. For us, our idea really only made sense or mattered if we had customers, right? If we had an idea to prove. Now, if it's just a strictly tech thing where you need to raise money and you need help doing that, I think, raising money and using an accelerator would make sense. But if it's a product or an idea or service that you can, do on your own, or you only need to find 1 or 2 other people to help you with it, I would try to do it yourself and learn the challenges, become resilient when it comes to, selling and getting customers, and acquiring, that money that, needs to be used to continue to generate the business. So I think it really depends. If it's strictly software, and you can't program, then I think you need to find a programmer or go out and potentially learn how to pitch and raise money. But other than that, for us, we did it without it. And I'm happy we did, because Aaron and I are still majority owners and we're able to do what we need to do to continue to move the business forward. We don't have other bosses to chime in.
Yeah, I think I'm going to add also that, accelerators are typically for people where you have something missing. So maybe you want to be in an entrepreneurial business, but you don't have an idea, and you want to join an accelerator program to link up with somebody else who's got an idea. You've got a venture idea, but you're missing key team members, or you've got a venture idea, but you need to raise finance. Usually the accelerator kind of is designed to kind of bring components together that are missing. And it's also really a more, I guess, a softer way for venture capitalists to vet venture ideas. So you're going into an accelerator because you're trying to raise finance, and this is the way the venture capitalist in the more modern way can really assess whether or not they're interested in putting some money into you. So if you are trying to raise money to start your business, then an accelerator is worth looking at. Okay, so the next one is any recommendations for somebody who wants to start a business but has a full-time job at the same time? That's a good question, because there's always that kind of debate. Should you just leave your full-time job and try and do it full-time, or is it possible to do it, start the venture alongside a day job?
Yeah, I would answer this two separate ways. One is, obviously, if you have dependents and obligations you have to meet, that you have to bring in income, it's often difficult to start a company without funding and meet those obligations. So everyone has 24 hours in a day. I would suggest that if you have a full-time job and can't afford to leave that full-time job, block out certain parts of your day, whether it be 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever it may be, that you can afford to spend on that business. Something I always recommend to people that come to me all the time for business questions is start with a business plan. That's number one. Start with a business plan, put it on paper before you actually put things to action. You need to have all the stuff written out, methodically written out in a way that when you ever have a question or some question poses you go back to that plan and say, okay, how do I need to navigate this? But ultimately, what I would suggest is if it's very difficult to start a company and have a full-time job. So if there's any way to not do that, I would recommend that.
And I would throw in one extra piece. The president of our company, he doesn't own the entire company, but what he did to begin working with us, because we couldn't pay him enough, during his lunch breaks, he worked in Pittsburgh, he would go on his lunch breaks and sell to restaurants. And he learned that he loved to do that more than he loved to do his job. So, everyone's able to find the time. It just depends on how much it really means to you. I would say that's really the main thing. So Aaron's points are spot on if you're in that situation.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit like the question about when's a good time to start a business, around the time when you graduate versus after you've got more experience. And a lot of people will say, yeah, you go and get experience in the industry and then start a business, but then you have mortgages and children and commitments, and it's more difficult. So, I mean, what's your view on that? I mean, you obviously found it quite a good time to be starting a business while you're on a college campus and then immediately after graduation.
Yeah, I mean, we're just very fortunate that we started this company in college and kept growing it and stuck through it, and eventually now we're in a very good position. So, really, what I got to say about that.
Yeah, and I mean, Dr. Pidway, I think you hit the nail on the head. Is the longer you wait, the more risk you could have, right? So I think if you have something that you think you're passionate about or that you want to accomplish, I would say go for it, but manage your risk. Some people are more risk tolerant than others. And I think that's really as far as you can go, because I can't tell someone to quit their job and then make no money and their family's on the street. That, to me, I can't say something like that. So It just depends on the situation.
Yeah, and it always reminds me of another one of my student entrepreneurs who was like, well, saying like, I've learned how to live off ramen noodles for the last 4 years. So it seems like a good training to be an entrepreneur for the next couple of years.
Yeah, I would say something. John and I just started paying ourselves 6 years into the business.
Yeah.
So it took us that long. I mean, we were making maybe $100, $200 a week tops. And then whatever we did, delivering food wise, that's we paid ourselves. So we paid everyone else first. We were fortunate enough to live at our parents' house after college. So that was a big burden. But obviously now, we have obligations,
Yeah. Yeah. And it's that sweat equity has value. And, ultimately, hopefully you'll reap the rewards of that sweat equity. But, that's an opportunity cost, of course, as well. Last question, I think. You clearly, managed to pivot into continuing to develop the business in a remote way. And this is a question about how are you managing remote work? And this seems to be a key element of your expertise here in terms of the current mode of keeping the business moving.
Yeah, I mean, if you have good people, you don't need to worry about anything. That's number one. So if you have good people, good leaders, I'll be the first one to tell you that I really haven't I've had very little influence in our remote work program. Our VP of Ops has handled pretty much all of that, and our president has, and they've done a phenomenal job. So we have team members in this company that are all bought in. So whether it's in person, face to face, or it's through Zoom or Google Meets, they use a calendar to schedule. That's one way, as just being super organized and having really, really, really good people that are bought in.
Yeah, the organization, that's the biggest thing. For Aaron and I, we were remote forever, whether it was my parents' basement, his father's basement, whatever restaurant I was in working at the moment. So for us too, this is just how we started the company, but to manage it, organization is the biggest piece, and then people.
Great. I think that appears to be all the questions in the chat. So I'll hand over, and I think we're close to the end of the hour.
Yeah, that does close it out. Thank you so much, Dr. Pittaway, for leading the discussion there. And John and Aaron, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it. Just an amazing story to hear about your company and how it grew and what you guys are doing. You both represent Ohio really well. And so we appreciate your time and are thankful that you could join us and share what you've learned along the way. Same for you, Dr. Pittaway. I really appreciate everything you do for Bobcats and your insights as well. Best of luck as you guys move forward. I know there's bright things in the future. And so thanks again for joining us. I hope you can make it back to Athens sometime soon. Hopefully we get back to normal. I'll see you out on Court Street. But thank you. Yeah, thank you everyone for joining. Really appreciate your time today. It was a lot of fun. Reminder, Empower Hour takes place every third Wednesday of the month. So be sure to join us next month as well. There is a code for the Bobcat store, 20% off. I know Dr. Pittaway was wanting that. The code is Empower 120. So the date's January 20th, 120. So Empower 120. Be sure to use that at the Bobcat store. Thanks again, everyone. I hope to see you at more virtual events in the future.
And thank you, John and Aaron, as well. Thank you.
More than welcome. Thank you all.